It was late 2003. My dad and I were coming back from the bank, and my dad decided to buy a brand new game on the way home from the local GameStop. Well, he tried it once and forgot about it, so I eventually tried it out. That game was called Viewtiful Joe. A red superhero, almost looking like a Power Ranger. Me, being a kid, I chose the kids difficulty because my parents didn't understand what the ESRB meant, so and fun fact, they would later have to stop me from giving people the finger, tell me to use the sign of the horns instead, and I still use that today. They also told me to stop using the word sexy in normal conversation, all because of this dang game. I was a weird child. The opening cutscene really got my attention. Getting sent into the movie? That's some Spy Kids level 3 level of awesomeness right there. I got my hands on the GameCube controller and heard Joe's iconic theme, and once I played a little more, got my first Henshin a Go-Go baby, I knew that this was my game. And I love this guy, I love this world. And I knew that Viewtiful Joe would be a game I'd be playing for a long, long time. Well, at least the first 3 episodes, until a certain shark ripped me to pieces and I could never beat this game on my own again. On my own. 20 years have passed, and yeah, I've grown up. I got through school, got a job, and gaming as a whole has really evolved in such a relatively short time. I've certainly changed a lot. And Joe? Well, globally, he didn't get the same amount of love that I gave the franchise as a kid, but now that Viewtiful Joe's 20 years old, I think it's time to take a look back at what truly made this franchise beautiful. Henshin a Go-Go, baby! The series was directed by Hideki Kamiya, who had previously directed Resident Evil 2 and Devil May Cry. Viewtiful Joe would be the second title to be released under the Capcom 5, which was a fancy name for a team of developers within Capcom Production Studio 4, and they called themselves Team Viewtiful, which they eventually turned into Clover, or Clover, I guess, because it's a combination of Clover and Lover together, but the Capcom 5 was a team supposedly made to create 5 Capcom exclusive games for the GameCube. As not many folks look fondly back on it now. As cool as it was, the GameCube didn't sell a lot when it first came out. And originally people thought that, hey, these Capcom 5 would be exclusive to the GameCube, but unfortunately it was later clarified that only one of the games, Resident Evil 4, would be exclusive. But the studio not only made Viewtiful Joe 1 and 2, but also God Hand and Okami later down the line. And both God Hand and Okami are both 2 super underrated games. Viewtiful Joe originally went under the working title Red Hot Man, but due to Red Hot Chili Peppers, they had to change the name. Viewtiful Joe's development team initially consisted of 6 people working under a 12-month deadline, so which is unheard of nowadays, but the team eventually did grow in size as needed. The art style combined Japanese tokusatsu with American comic book superheroes, and adopted a 3D cel-shade animation, which at the time wasn't super popular as games were trying to look more realistic, but they wanted to try something that hadn't been done before and something brand new. Okay, obviously spoilers for all the Viewtiful Joe games coming up, but these games are 20 years old for goodness sakes, and there isn't a ton of story to get into, but at its core, the premise of Viewtiful Joe is very simple. Joe's girlfriend Sylvia gets kidnapped by movie villains, and Joe has to travel into the land of the movies to save her from Jado, evil organization syndicate trying to take over movie land and also the real world. Joe's favorite movie superhero, Captain Blue, gives him a V-Watch, allowing him to transform into Viewtiful Joe, his superhero form. What separates him from other games at the time is his special VFX power. This allows him to either slow down time, speed it up, or zoom in to create different effects. Not only does this work for combat, affecting like how hard you punch, how fast you punch, changing your jumps and landings into attacks, But this also affects the environment, creating pretty unique puzzles, such as slowing down time to cause flying enemies to fall or speeding them up to make them rise. Joe's main arsenal is a series of punches and kicks, and you really gotta be really up close to really make a difference, because the hitboxes on some of these guys are pretty wonky. You can hop above attacks or duck below them in order to get them dizzy, and then really be able to hammer in a bunch of hits at once, which is probably the main way you're going to be doing damage in this game. It's kind of like Punch-Out in a sense, dodging attacks and waiting for an opening to really lay the smackdown on them. The big draw to this game is its combo system, called the Rock-On combo, yes, that's the actual name, involving launching an enemy in slow-mo to be able to hit another and then knocking as many as you can before your VHX power runs out, leaving you vulnerable and turning you back to just plain old Joe. The more enemies you combo, the more points you can get, which can then be used in the shop for even more techniques, items like boomerangs or shocking pink bombs, or upgrades to your health or VHX gauge. Comboing adds a lot of depth to this game because it really makes you think about where enemies are in relation to you, and how you can get them together for the max amount of points before time runs out. Like many things, the game doesn't tell you any of this. Viewtiful Joe is hard, but not necessarily because of the enemies always being super difficult, but because there's a lot of things you just need to know to be able to play the game effectively. Like, how are you supposed to know this guy's 4 sets of attacks in a row when he only telegraphs for one of them? Or the fact that you need to use these rocks to be on fire in order to break this guy's shield. And also, this game came out before online guides or videos or YouTube became super popular, so in order to beat this game back then, people had to either struggle, buy a Prima guide, or just cheat. It's so strange that a game marketed to be so bright and colorful that ended up being so difficult. Just like another Capcom series I know.
So what's with the feed watch on your arm, man? What, you think you're some kind of Mega Man or something?
The game balance is a little weird too. Joe's strongest attack, the Red Hot 100, requires you to be zoomed in and slow all the time, which is good for really getting a lot of damage in, but it makes it really hard to see what's going on, and you tend to push the enemies away from you when using it, making you really whiff most of the time. It also takes away from the backgrounds and art, which are really, really detailed. There's a lot of little gags and jokes in there. This move also isn't good for combo, so you're really playing a choice of, do you want to beat this guy faster or do you want to get points? Which points are important for unlocking stuff in the shop, but is it really worth beating things faster for it? It's a real balancing act. The game also doesn't like to give you many checkpoints, so if you lose to the second boss, you need to do a whole extra section first if you lose. Autosave who? This makes some parts, especially the boss rush near the end of the game, extremely unfair. And what rewards do you get for beating the game? Even harder difficulties! And new playable characters. You can play as Sylvia, Captain Blue, Alistair, and Dante from the Devil May Cry series? Kamiya really loves his baby. Nevertheless, there's a lot of just really memorable characters and memorable lines that really make this game fun and charming in its own unique way. And despite all of its issues, it got plenty of awards when it first came out. While the game didn't quite meet up to expectations for Capcom, the game's budget was pretty small and it was still considered successful enough to get its own sequel. Viewtiful Joe 2 was one of the first games I've ever beaten and is definitely my favorite out of the 2 mainline games. Kamiya didn't direct this one, but did get control of the story, which is just as wacky as the first. You're collecting rainbow Oscars and stopping the evil organization Ghetto. Yeah, not a fan of that name. Viewtiful Joe definitely would not be okay if it was made today.
Oh, what you say? I know Sergeant. I, Big Lee, martial arts sensei of Ghetto Japan.
Sergeant. The mid-2000s, not the best of times.
Prepare to die with power of Thunderbolt Shock!
Yeah, you kinda deserve that. The big change in this game is that Sylvia is now part of your team, and you can switch between her and Joe at any time. For her neutral special, she wields a gun. to hit enemies from afar, as well as she has her own exclusive VFX power called Replay, letting her attack 3 times at the same time. And while Joe uses fire in his attack, she uses electricity, which does lead to some interesting puzzles. This does make her a little less useful for combos, as she can only really kick enemies around rather than punch them and kick them as well. And generally, it's easier to just use Joe anyway. A lot of the game is still designed around him, but they also don't play each other well, and they don't really play together well in the cutscenes, as Sylvia seems pretty abusive. Thankfully, the game is much easier than the first, and especially in the easier difficulties. I don't know, the game just seems a little bit more straightforward and streamlined, and there's less just unfair parts. There's way more checkpoints with a save point. Pretty much every checkpoint has a save point, so you don't need to worry about that. Sylvia also has her own new unlockables in the shop too, such as... But other than that, there aren't too many changes mechanically, but hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. A lot of the enemies from the first game are reskins in this one, but the environments I feel are much more lush, and it really makes it feel more like a journey than the first game. You're fighting a giant dinosaur, a sleeping guy, and hey, more Alistair. Also in this game are new unlockable extra challenges called chambers. Some of them are unlocked pretty easily, casually beating the game, but some of them have very, very specific unlock requirements that you definitely need a guide for. Personally, I find Viewtiful Joe 2 to be the better game, as it's much less frustrating than the first, but with the extra save points, more ways to attack from a distance, and way more lenient puzzles. And while in the first game we learn about Sylvia's dad, Captain Blue, in Viewtiful Joe 2 we learn more about Joe's dad, Jet, and how he fits into the cast. Viewtiful Joe 2 ends off promising one last adventure Joe and Sylvia need to do to save the world, and in order to complete the trilogy, which we never got. But we did get some other stuff.
What are we standing around here for? If we can't do it, no one can. Ready, partner? Let's do it! We're Viewtiful Joe and Sylvia!
Look at this! Viewtiful Joe is popular enough to get its own anime. And man, it's an anime. In an extremely rare case for anime, both the Japanese and English dub have the same opening, pretty much. And while I can't play it here, it's one of my favorite anime openings ever. It's called Brighter Side by Saga, and it's really rocking and uplifting. It really encompasses Viewtiful Joe as a whole, in my opinion. The premise loosely follows the game, but adds a few new characters, such as Joe's new sidekick, Junior, a big fan of Captain Blue who lives in the land of movies and uses yo-yos to attack. Pretty unique. You also meet Sprocket, who's the second in command of Jado, and later joins Gedo in Season 2, who was heavily censored in the English dub, to the point where she didn't really have much scenes at all. Kind of wondered what her point was. With many of the enemies reappearing in the show, it definitely feels much more Villain of the Week Power Ranger-y. Nothing too serious or story-wise, and pretty goofy a lot of the time. I mean, hey, it's Viewtiful Joe. It pays homage to the media that came before it. The show was licensed by anime distributor Genian Entertainment, with its first 26 episodes airing in the United States on Kids WB. There was a Season 2, but only in Japan. And it didn't get its second season because the block was eventually moved to the CW. Of course, when it came to America, it was censored to heck and back. Like, really. This game was rated T, so they had to scrub out a lot of stuff to make it for kids again, such as removing Joe's finger, removing Sprocket. But after the show concluded, it's been really hard to find it. It was on Crunchyroll for a short point and then went away. But thankfully, as of 2023, the entire series has been uploaded to the Internet Archive with questionable quality in the mix between dub and sub. But hey, beauty is subjective. You can still find DVDs and UMDs of the collection floating around on the internet. There were, I believe, 8 volumes in all, as well as a CD with some of the music, which is pretty good. But because some of these DVDs are hard to find, they might become lost media soon. But how do you advertise this? Well, how about Foot Locker? Yeah, there was a point where you could go into a Foot Locker and leave with Viewtiful Joe DVDs. Man, the oddies were such a time. I was able to catch some of this when it first ran out, and I was like, what? Viewtiful Joe's on TV? That was definitely a shocker. The episodes are pretty all over the place, so it's not exactly a must watch, but hey, if you love Viewtiful Joe, it's definitely worth checking it out. There were 2 more spin-offs after Viewtiful Joe 2 came out. One of them was called Red Hot Rumble, or Battle Carnival in Japan, and it's Smash Brothers. Yeah, it's literally just Smash Brothers, sponsored by Johnny Rockets. Apparently this game was given out at Johnny Rockets? Wow, yeah. God, I love the oddies. Interestingly, this was based off the anime instead of the games, and me, not knowing who the anime was very confused. Who's this kid? Who's this girl? The premise is simple. Captain Blue wants a new role for his new movie, so everyone wants to be a star, but there's a lot of mishaps going on, especially with the technology. And it turns out the technology becomes alive and gets upset that all the cameras, all the mics, all that doesn't get to become a part of the movie. Joe explains that all the cameras, all the lights, all the microphones are an important part of the movie, and everything's good and Gucci again.
You guys have a really important role to play too, you know?
Really? We do?
Of course! Without film, the camera's just a useless hunk of junk, and nothing would end up on film without good lighting. You support us every step of the way. We need you. Even Sylvia's romantic talk would be pointless without a mic to pick up the sound. We all have different roles to play in the movie. It's being different that makes each of us special.
Just like how Viewtiful Joe here needs a cool rival like me.
And how a hero needs a sexy heroine. Even a big hero needs a nice sidekick.
You can play as Viewtiful Joe, Sylvia, Captain Blue Jr., Alistair, Sprocket, Charles III, Hulk Davidson, Grand Bruce, Bianchi, Jet Black, Bloody Rachel, and of course, in the PSP version, featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series. What's interesting is it's not all Smash Brothers, they somehow managed to fit some Mario Party minigames in there too. It's definitely a strange addition to the series, but hey, Viewtiful Joe is pretty strange. I don't know if I can recommend it though. It is a 4-player game, but no online, so local only, and it's a pretty quick game if you just want to jam right through. But I feel like if you only played the games, you wouldn't really get a lot of it, because a lot of the areas in the game are from the anime. But if you're a big fan of the anime, then yeah, check it out. Plus the cutscenes are really cool. It's sad to say that this was Viewtiful Joe's last real console game, though. I remember playing it for a few times as a kid and getting bored really quick because it wasn't like the others. There's still one more Viewtiful Joe game to talk about, and that's Viewtiful Joe Double Trouble for the Nintendo DS. This was a game for a long time that I thought was cancelled. It felt like a fever dream when I first heard about it as a kid, but apparently it did come out, it just was very hard to find. But it is still a Viewtiful Joe game, and much more of a Viewtiful Joe game than Red Hot Rumble. But yeah, the artwork is good, the music's nice, and oh god, look at this. Yep, this game streams the DS that just came out. It does not look good. I feel like I'd get a headache for playing this game for too long. But again, the stills are good and the music is still pretty nice, and it is based on the games rather than the anime too. The story does introduce Joe's sister, Jasmine, and we also, spoilers, learn about their mother, Junko, who was a great movie star who passed away, and it does have a pretty touching ending. You could argue that this is the third of the trilogy because it does definitely talk about the first 2 games, but Kamiya insists that he does want to make the true third game someday, whenever that happens. The game does introduce a few new touchscreen controls, which aren't too bad, but the gameplay is a little slower than I wish it could be, and there's just no combo. It's more about just, hey, can you beat this guy effectively and get as many points as you can? These powers include Scratch, which lets you scratch the touchscreen to cause stuff fall down on your enemies, and also Split, which lets you move the top layer of the touchscreen to cause things to move around. Honestly, pretty clever. You can also only play as Joe because Sylvia was delegated the camera woman duty. And Joe's also in the real world, so he can only use his powers with a special camera or something. This is the closest we're gonna get to Viewtiful Joe 3, so I guess I'll take what I can get. Unfortunately, Clover disbanded in 2007. Even though their games were really good, the games just couldn't sell. But thankfully, the team's still doing okay. A lot of them moved on to form Platinum Games, making games such as Mad World, Infinite Space, and of course, Bayonetta. They would also make The Wonderful 101, which does heavily reference Viewtiful Joe. Okami would eventually get a sequel in the form of Okamiden, and a lot of their characters would end up in Marvel vs. Capcom games in the future.
It's alright, Joe. Pretty cool. It's stylish versus beautiful. Okay then. That means I'm both beautiful and stylish.
Man, Joe does not look or sound good in there. But hey, he's there. Ever since then, Viewtiful Joe's just kind of fallen into obscurity. He would eventually make a cameo in the Mega Man vs. Sonic crossover comics. Side note, the Mega Man comics are amazing, and I do want to do a video on them someday. Viewtiful Joe is really a point of its time, with very distinct art styles, strange advertising promotions. Viewtiful Joe Vespa? He really feels like a moment of his time. But hey, how many video game characters can you say got to fight Marvel? If you think about it though, Viewtiful Joe is kind of a surprise hit. Like, what other game series can you talk about that got 4 games in 3 years? That's amazing. Original IP too. Viewtiful Joe is a series that still holds a deep place in my heart. People still clamor, hoping for that Viewtiful Joe finally gets his comeback someday. And there's still plenty of fans still loving Viewtiful Joe on the internet, still doing fan art. Viewtiful Joe just has a distinct, unique art style that just sticks out and you won't be able to forget. There are the occasional merch drops, which sell out super duper fast, but it's sad to see that Capcom has neglected something that people have loved so much. Like, he was forgotten on their 40th anniversary art. Kamiya does hope to finish the trilogy someday, and we still haven't even gotten HD remasters of these games. Like, you'd think after 20 years we'd be getting something. If Okami got something, Viewtiful Joe can too. Some of these games range from pretty easy to pretty difficult to find on the aftermarket, but hopefully this video encouraged some of you all to check out these games again. Maybe someday in the future we'll finally get a re-release or new game in this Viewtiful Joe series. But until then, just remember, everyone loves a hero and everyone loves you. Stay beautiful, everyone.
You know, once you figure out your role, anyone could be a hero, baby.